Driven Out in Numbers by This Is The Kit was that song there, and that was off their album Moonshine Freeze. You're on 2SCR 107.3, listening to The Daily. My name is James Hill, and coming up next we'll be talking with the eVestigator, Simon Smith, about 2 recently discovered bugs in the hardware of most phones and laptops. But until then, this is your place to be, and we're going to be, 2SCR is your place to be, I should say, and we're going to be hearing from Scabs with Paul this week.
Great new sounding music, so definitely stay tuned. This is your place to be. 107.3
2SCR.
I hope your Monday's going very, very well, whether you're back in the grind at work or still living it up on holidays. I'm sure the hot, muggy weather in Sydney right now isn't going to keep you down. Coming up in about 10 minutes at 9:45, we're going to be talking to an eVestigator about how phones and laptops are objects that actually have these bugs that we've only just recently found in them. And Simon Smith will be joining us to talk about that. Before that, though, we're going to be listening to some Yaej. After that is the song. Still dubbing by Dub Specialists there off their album Studio One Supreme, Maximum 70s and 80s. You're on 2SCR 107.3. My name's James Hill and you are listening to The Daily. Now we're about to speak to an eVestigator, Simon Smith, because we love using our phones and devices, but it seems the processor used to run them may have some serious security flaws. And as a result, hackers can take advantage of these bugs to do serious damage to you and your devices, such as stealing your information stored on the hard drive. So what can we do about these bugs? Spectre and Meltdown. And to discuss more, we're speaking to the eVestigator, Simon Smith, for more. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning. How are you going today?
Very well. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I guess I'll just ask the first basic question, which is, these bugs have been present on CPUs found in most devices since the mid-90s. How haven't they been discovered until recently?
Well, that's actually quite a good question, and I think it's because of the complexity of it. It's quite a hard thing to detect, and a lot of these CPU manufacturers never really realised that people would come to find these bugs. It's something that is so low level and so complex. It's almost like inventing something that looked good at the time, but you never really think, like the Y2K bug, you don't really think ahead that far and think that, if we build a date that it can only satisfy this many digits, what's going to happen after year 2000? So I don't think they thought ahead that far when they built it.
Yeah, right. Bit of a scary thought sometimes.
Yeah.
So which processors and devices are mainly affected by this?
Well, the winner is AMD, but they're still affected somewhat. It's a bit sketchy as to who's owning up at the moment, really. AMD are the ones that are least affected. iPhones, anything with Intel inside, the most affected. I suppose it doesn't help when I think the CEO of Intel sold, all his shares pretty much the day that this was announced. Intel CPUs, so iPhones and Apple, every kind of Intel most affected. Trying to keep it simple, they both go outside their allocated space to look outside where they're supposed to be. Every application's got a spot in their memory where they're supposed to be able to store data. And again, they didn't think of it last time within the last 20 years that perhaps, if something happened in this way, they could accidentally sneak into this other area and look at what some other application is storing.
Yeah, right. That could be, that's a pretty scary thought. Very interesting, though, how these things that we've created are able to end up doing more than we thought they were able to do, kind of thing. So for those that might not know, myself included, apart from being a James Bond film title, what does Spectre do?
Spectre uses a technology called speculative execution. It's good, it's supposed to be. It's cache. So it remembers calculations, and it's supposed to speed up our computers. So over the last 20 years or so, all these Pentiums and Pros and all these numbers at the end of our CPUs have all been for a reason, and essentially things have got faster and faster, and we never really looked at the repercussions of it because we just kept on getting faster. But we didn't realise that although it was speeding up things, there's now a repercussion. So because we've been caching things, we haven't realised that we're storing this cache in an area that is compromisable. So it makes sense, really. Like, if we're doing computational storage and we're actually calculating things that are constantly having to draw upon all the time, and to go back there, it's faster to go back. Like, if we're working with spreadsheets and we're always doing algebra or a certain type of mathematical formula, it's going to be faster because the CPU learns to do mathematics a certain way. So it just says, all right, well, you know what, I'm going to do it this way, this time, all the time. And it basically caches the method that it uses and it puts it into the CPU's memory. So it basically puts essentially a learning method into its memory. So that's what speculative execution is. It's sort of like a guessing method. And people have programmed applications to use that memory for other things like passwords and for formulas.
Right.
And that's they didn't realize that was actually vulnerable memory.
Well, on the same line of questioning, what is Meltdown? What does Meltdown do?
Well, the difference with Meltdown is that it's looking at the kernel's memory. We're not talking about KFC here, but we're talking about the computer, and that's when it comes a bit more dangerous. Every time you press a key on your keyboard, you're only typing something, and you think it's finished when you finish typing. But when you're that low level, every keystroke you press, when you do things a second time around, things are a lot faster. Meltdown looks at things on a system-based level. That's a real concern because that's not just looking at the application like Internet Explorer. That's looking at the whole system. So that's where the real danger comes in, where somebody who's using, say, Linux on a shared server could potentially hack into a Windows system of a completely different user who's on a virtual private server on the same server, but basically on a completely different instance, for instance, or an Excel macro can be a virus that can actually read the password of your open QuickBooks.
Yeah, right.
So it goes outside of its isolated space, and it's a scary thought because now with virtualization and with people storing multiple servers on the one server with virtual private servers, you could potentially have a look at the passwords or the details of the cache of other particular applications. And that's why AMD and some software versions and some software packages are sort of a little bit more safer than others because they run an isolated execution, but Meltdown can actually go outside of that execution and attack the kernel cache, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
of the whole kernel, essentially. So, and if you can do that, you can think of the damage. I mean, if you can go into the whole sort of computer and say, oh, I want to have a look at this memory over here, it's almost like ransomware. Essentially, you could almost sort of like go into BIOS and make it so it doesn't boot up ever again.
Yeah, right. It's only occurring to me now is like lots and lots of factors to these different software applications really that just affect the way you use a computer. What have the companies whose products are affected by these bugs? What have they done to remedy it?
This is where it's good where you've got one manufacturer and where you'd be counting your lucky stars, like with Apple, because you're going to get an update. With Android, even though Android are very good at their updates, you've got, 10,000 manufacturers or so that have to get that update through their versions, and that they do believe that they can actually get an update through software, which to me is interesting, considering it's a hardware failure essentially. And that's where everybody's complaining about the speed issues that are going to cause from this, which from my research, and it's all very fresh as well, I'm looking at it and from the news, but they say that it doesn't actually make that much of a difference in testing at the moment. They have noticed some disk speed difference, but not much processing difference. But it just basically means people have to be on the lookout for updates. So they need to contact their manufacturers, update to the latest version. A lot of people snuck the updates already in December, so they're pretty safe. There's going to be, certainly on our website, and I'm sure the media's going to be into promoting the updates on who's got what out there. I think Microsoft Internet Explorer and Safari, they're already working on or have issued updates. Apple, I think, have announced they're going to be implementing it in the next iOS version, and a lot of them are doing it through their browsers because that's, ultimately the most dangerous point where someone's going to get a virus from if somebody writes something.
Yeah, on the internet.
Yeah, so it is a concern, though, because everybody carries a mobile phone, and their smartphones, and everybody uses the internet. People don't realise that ARM and Intel, these chipsets, are even in devices these days as well. Chromebooks are also affected. They're not affecting Chromecast, but certainly Chromebooks. People have to contact their manufacturers. But the most thing that I don't think people need to fuss or stress at the moment, because
that's good.
I have not heard or seen anybody who's actually capable of exploiting this.
Right.
I think somebody did a test, and in JavaScript they were able to make something. It's very low-level machine code and very difficult to exploit. I'd say it'd be very hard for somebody now knowing about this to get something commercial out there. And they've already started fixing the bugs at CPU level and already dispatched in December the fixes for a lot of the manufacturers anyway. So,
okay.
I think people are going to be fine. It's just a matter of don't close your eyes. Just keep your eyes open and wait for that next update to come out.
Yeah, check with your manufacturer and look for those updates.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, Simon, for joining us. We're just coming up to the news, so we could talk all day about this stuff, but we'll have to cut you short there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, I hope I've helped you out a little bit, and you'll be fine.
You heard it first here on 2SCR. Thank you so much, Simon.
Welcome.
You're on the Daily on 2SCR 107.3. My name's James Hill. It's about 30 seconds until the news, but until then, I'm just going to play a little bit of music just to take you there. This one is 12 Carnival Horns.